System riding to the core. Yeah. Reppin' inner city left.
This is the Inner City Left broadcast. Today is Friday, October 3rd. I am Amin TMK alongside Emoja Lil Tanky Sumler. Emoja, hello. Happy Friday. How are you? What's going on?
What's good? I got a lock standing up. It's proof that I really am a unicorn. So there you go.
And there it is. What's the movie with the little kids? Remember one with the little kids? Alfalfa. Do you remember that?
Oh,
yeah, you got the alfalfa top. That's nice. Hey, it's better than the Something About Mary, right?
Ooh.
That's a deeper cut. Sorry. Yeah, hey. Ben
The
Stiller's
Little Rascals, by the way. Is what they
The Little Rascals. Hey, I figured you would know. You have a wealth of knowledge.
You're a little rascal. You little rascal.
I'm not so little anymore.
Yo, kids ain't rascals no more, right? Everybody's a YN. Yeah, look at these crazy YNs. We can't control them. What happened to the little rascals? Why can't, we be little rascals anymore?
There's actually a great tweet about that. I won't do it. Follow us on Inner City Left. I'm going to post it a little bit later, but it does talk about that, and it's a great point, actually, that you meant it. When you give people names other than something, familiar, the kids, boys will be boys, and those kinds of things. It doesn't seem to happen when it comes to POCs or black people. Anyway, that's just how it goes. That's my thought. That's my feelings. Let's talk about some geopolitics, shall we? I am excited about some guests that we have coming up soon.
Yes.
Lots of fun things for you guys. Lots of fun things for you.
Stay locked in, y'all.
Let's talk about Palestine. We should always talk about it. There's tons to talk about all the time, my friend. Flotilla. It happened. Nothing got through. Everybody kidnapped on the high seas. We knew it was going to happen. 50 plus ships. And this is coming around the same time as this peace plan. I don't know if you heard about the peace plan there, Tanky.
I did.
You did. I thought you might.
Ooh.
There's a couple stipulations. There was this big
How can anybody say no?
People were saying, hey, what are your thoughts here on the ceasefire? I was hoping there was a ceasefire going on. This is something that I got from the ceasefire. Negotiation or whatever it is. It looks like Tony Blair would have been the governor, the viceroy, if you will, of Gaza. And this is something that they expect Hamas and the Palestinians living in Gaza to somehow accept. First of all, talk to me a little bit about Tony Blair, and your opinion of him, and also sort of this so-called peace plan that Trump put out about 2 days ago.
Man, Tony Blair is a piece of shit, okay? He goes all the way back to, you can't hate, George Bush and not hate Tony Blair. Because, it's two sides of the same coin. They the ones that led the original, the second version of the coalition of the willing, you know what I'm saying, that went into Ukraine, into Iraq and destroyed them under the most ridiculous of they got weapons of mass destruction. He was a leader of the Labor Party, and the joke back then in the 2000s when he was in power is like, he was like Britain's first president, right? Like you a prime minister, but you rule kind of like you a little president, and again, right? He's really the guy that keyed me to be ready for guys like Trudeau, right? Where all the liberals are like, oh, it's Tony Blair, right? You can't.
Oh, my days.
Oh, my days. Oh, my days. It's good Lord Tony Blair, right? One thing I would say about this dude is, what the fuck does he have to do with the Middle East at all? Why does he keep getting juiced in on these things? Like, he's not Jewish. He's a Zionist, but who isn't? In the Western governments.
Oh my, that's a fact.
Right? He's not Palestinian. He literally, I don't even understand how Britain is looped into this at all. Like, Britain has nothing to do with this other than, once again, reminding us of the Balfour Declaration in and of itself. Like, I guess they'll always be juiced in a little bit because it was their original passion project that the United States has kind of taken ownership for.
Yeah. And just sort of to this, to this peace plan, these peace deals that seem to keep popping up every so often. That's full of non-starters, and the general public, the general media, keeps talking about it, and it's just one of those, one of those things where we are interested in controlling the narrative. So we are going to say there was a peace plan. Hamas rejected it. This is just like Biden did. It's the same deal. It's the same plan, and they keep running it. And
it gets worse and worse. Like, what's happened historically is the Americans have presented the plan. They give it to, Hamas, by way of all of their proxies. Either they'll use their diplomats in Egypt, or they'll use the diplomats in Qatar, and they'll get this to Hamas leadership, however in the hell that happens, right? And, Hamas will agree, and they'll send it back, and then the Americans and or the Israelis will add all these caveats. And they're like, wait, well, that's not what we signed on to. So this is the latest iteration of that. I mean, Hamas has been trying to, get a peace deal since October 10th. That is a matter of record. And it's normally not them that destroys the thing. But to call it a peace deal is actually just not accurate at all. It is a unconditional surrender. You give up all of the hostages. You leave the government. Trust us. Turn yourself in, and we'll give you safe passage out the country forever. If you were Hamas, you got to leave. And what does that mean? Like, did someone had voted for? Does that make them? You know what I'm saying? Like, and it's this kind of nebulousness that's in there. The other things that are really interesting is, so they're saying Hamas is not the legitimate government, but the Palestinian Authority is. And the last time they had an election went all the way back to, I really think it was the Obama years, right? Because Hillary Clinton, no. It was the Bush years, because when Hamas won, they called Rice. They called what was her name? Condoleezza Rice. And they're like, what's up, Condi? Like, really wilding out, real ignorant shit, right? They did that, like, y'all had an election and we won, right? So that goes all the way back to the 2000s. That was the last election after the Americans, right?
Exact, my friend. You were correct.
Yeah, after the Americans saw that their party lost, the Palestinian Authority, although the Palestinian Authority did win the elections in the West Bank. You know what I'm saying? So if you're nullifying those election results, which, hey, I totally agree. They need to have a new election. If democracy is going to be the thing, you can't have somebody in that's been in that long, right? But they're not allowing an election. They're imposing, at best, the Palestinian Authority. At worst, there's all kinds of rumors. There are rumors that the IDF is still going to keep their military troops there. It's going to be some kind of viceroy situation with Trump on top, literally Trump on top. And then, like, Tony Blair is a little bit under him, and then under that there will be appropriate Arab leadership. Again, nebulous as hell. I mean, are we talking about HTS in Syria? You know what I'm saying? Are we talking about the Palestinian Authority? Are we talking about delegates from Qatar or Saudi Arabia? No one really knows. We know that they won't be from Gaza, though. They're not going to let anybody from Gaza have any type of connection to leadership. And then this place will have to be permanently de-armed, right? Now, look, if we want to say, this is the Levant, it's the home of three important cultural faiths, and because of all of the wars that have happened here historically, we're going to do a weapons-free freeze. Nobody can have weapons. Not Lebanon, not Syria, not Jordan, not Israel, not whatever this new Palestine looks like, right? Nobody in this area can hold weapons. That would be a conversation, probably still a non-starter because Americans always cheat, but and their proxies cheat. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about only the Arab people, only the Palestinians are no longer allowed to have even a nominal security force, which again is a right enshrined into international law as a subjugated people. You have the right to resist oppression, right? That is codified in the United Nations, and they're wanting them to forswear that. They're wanting them to accept. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, what is the positive? Well, some of the people that have been put into these Israeli jails under the most dubious of circumstances, which, by the way, ask all them people on the flotilla how easy it is to end up in an Israeli jail, right? So they're giving those people back, and it's not like those guys are hostages. Those guys are criminals because they're in jail because Israel said they did something bad. But the people that are in Gaza, those are hostages. Those are innocent people, even the ones that were in the military, even the ones that were in the militarized kibbutzes, they're all innocents, And so once again, right, I mean, this is what you're looking at. Like, what is there for the Palestinians to sign on to? I mean, to call it a peace treaty is just patently incorrect. It is by any other terms, a surrender and subjugation pact.
This was a few months ago. This is Joe Trump / Donald Biden. More of the same. I just want to we heard everything you just said. We heard what they just talked about in terms of, this peace plan with huge quotation marks around it. This was last month, Donnie J on Fox News.
Beautiful communities for the 1.9 million people. We'll build beautiful communities, safe communities. Could be 5, 6, could be 2, but we'll build safe communities a little bit away from where they are, where all of this danger is. In the meantime, I would own this. Think of it as a real estate development for the future. It would be a beautiful piece of land.
Would the Palestinians have the right to return?
Spent. No, they wouldn't, because they're going to have much better housing, much better. In other words, I'm talking about building a permanent place for them, because if they have to return now, it'll be years before you could ever. It's not habitable. It will be years before it could happen. I'm talking about starting to build, and I think I could make a deal with Jordan. I think I could make a deal with Egypt. We give them billions and billions of dollars a year.
Sorry about that last little part. You know how it goes with while you're trying to screen grab things. But again, we're supposed to somehow believe that there is a peace plan that we want to have between, Hamas and Israel. But also we are hearing in the domestic world things like this from Donald Trump, where they want to turn this into a beachfront property. Jared Kushner was already tagged to do something like this.
Why? Yeah. Are you Jewish? Are you Semitic? Are you Palestinian? I mean, what? It's just fascinating, right? To listen to how they make these things make sense to themselves, And this is where really the narcissistic personality kind of comes out, and how easy it is to exploit that, right? For someone that needs that constant praise all the time, someone like Bibi can, there's something in it for you, man. And Fredo was happy, and Fredo lived, happily ever after, But I mean, they're saying the quiet parts out loud.
That's what I'm saying.
The Palestinians can't live there now.
They expect us to believe some sort of idea. I mean, again, I just want to go back to the flotilla, because it should let you know that international law is just irrelevant. It's not it's what can you, it goes back to the Dave Chappelle skit. Oh, the UN doesn't like what I'm doing. Maybe they should sanction me with their army. Oh, they don't have an army. Oh, you have a flotilla where there is the Spanish Navy and the Italian Navy who are supposed to be going with you. But at the end of the day, they might as well just be the Coast Guard. They're there to pick you up if you jump off the boat or something happens. And again, you end up in an Israeli jail. And I just, while I'm on that subject, I want to show this to some of our listeners. Maybe you've seen this. I don't know. Let's get Trump off of here. But this is one of the ships that Israel is using to illegally transport their hostages. The Israeli Navy landing ship INS, maybe you can help me with that pronunciation, Komayut returns to Ashdod with kidnapped crew of the flotilla on board. And guess this was not given to them. This was not something that Trump gave to them, my friend. This ship was given to them last year by Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. This is the ship for our podcast listeners. Just going around. I don't know if you can see it or have any ideas or thoughts about like sort of what the capabilities of this large ship is. But again, we talk about the ridiculous amount of lethal aid, this what we now call it, I guess, and the $3 billion that's there every single year, billions-dollar packages that go to Israel every single year. This is not a Joe Biden thing or a Donald Trump thing or a Barack Obama thing. It's a United States thing. And when you have a continuous support of a genocidal country that has attacked 9 other sovereign nations this year, it's not just Gaza, it's not just the West Bank, it's not just the Northern Resistance. It's 9 different countries. And here we have Joe Biden, Kamala Harris being the ones that supplied this. And, you know, again, I don't know how many times I make the point that not much changes when it comes to red and blue. They're the same. That's why we say vote third party. Any thoughts on this or anything you can tell us about this ship or anything?
Yeah, I mean, this is a you would normally use something like this to land troops, you know what I'm saying? Like, you know, in a place like Venezuela, you know, if you're going to swing by, drop 4,000 or 5,000 troops, you know, you use boats like these. Yeah, I mean, it just goes back to the Chinese proverb, you know, the difference between China and America is in China, you can change the policy, but you can't change the party. In America, you can change the party, but you can't change the policy. It doesn't really matter whether you vote for Kamala, Joe Biden. Doesn't really matter whether you vote for, you know, Donald Trump, Bush, Obama, any of those guys. This foreign policy does not change, you know. And so there you are. Once again, I mean, you brought up the navies that were escorting, you know, the flotilla, which, by the way, is just, in my opinion, it's just performative activism. Because what do you expect to happen? Like, it is a war zone. Okay, if you're not willing to sail into fire, then it's all performative. You're just taking the world's most dangerous cruise. Is how you got to look at it. You know what I'm saying? The Spanish Navy is in NATO. The Italian Navy is in NATO. You think a NATO army or navy is going to provide protection for you past an Israeli blockade? That's just not realistic. Like, that was never realistic. And a little bit of shame on everybody that allowed themselves to be fooled in that way. You have to stop thinking like, oh, it's just 1 or 2 bad apples. No, all of the West is in concert and in connection with what is happening in Gaza. They're providing material assets, you know, they're providing intelligence. Some of them are actually providing troops. You know, so like all of this is real and you have to acknowledge that. We had an American a couple of years ago self-immolate, you know, to say I can't be part of this no more, you know, talking about the role that he'd already played it in. That was several years ago, you know. I always thought that Navy was going to be more like a shepherd. That's what they were there for. Herd them to the Israelis, make sure that none of them can break out of the pack. You know, it's like when you got, you know, 100 sheep, you need a dog to keep them in a pack, you know, to keep them close, to keep them grouped up. And that's what those navies were for. The Spanish Navy and the Italian Navy were nothing more than shepherds to make sure they delivered that flotilla to the Israelis. This was ordained. This was going to happen. This was always the only possibility. Or how about this? This was the best possibility out of what could happen. Because, you know, the Israelis could have just blew them out of the water, which they have done before. You know, they have definitely sank ships that were on flotillas on the way to break this siege. You know, breaking a siege is not a romantic thing. It's an act of war, you know.
Yeah, and I think it can be even more effective when you talk about the dock workers and the union workers kind of shutting down,
right?
You know, the ability to load weapons and things like that. those are also important. And the flotilla, wherever you stand on it, it doesn't seem like it's something that has a possibility
not working.
Of benefit.
Try something else.
Yeah, let's pivot a little bit. Let me see what we have here. Speaking of Vladimir Putin, speaking of Palestine, speaking of Gaza, there was a interview that Vladimir Putin was doing, and he does all the time. He speaks to the press, and this was something that he was saying about Gaza. I'll get to some more things because there's some interesting things that he said, but I just want to start here because, again, we hear a lot of things about Vladimir Putin, kind of being vilified. We hear him about being sort of an authoritarian leader of Russia, even though he shares power with a great deal, many people. But this was something that he said earlier yesterday.
The situation in Gaza, it's a horrible thing in the modern history of mankind. And even the pro-Western Secretary General of the United Nations Organization, Guterres, said that Gaza was turned into the biggest children's cemetery in the world. What could be more tragic? As for the proposal of President Trump's on Gaza, it might come as a surprise to you, but Russia is ready to support it.
Something that he mentioned as well that I thought that was interesting, and I'll let you react, is talking about the UN secretary being Western-backed, and how the UN has sort of been this, just mouthpiece, release valve, if you will, for America and their desires for global hegemony. Before we get into the full things that Putin said, can you just talk a little bit about sort of how all these countries we vilified, Russia being obviously the one that we just played, but also China, North Korea, these types of places being far more pro-Palestine. Venezuela, another one, Cuba. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, if you don't bend the knee, you're a bad person. I mean, I hate that it's that simple, but it's that simple. There's no world where you can explain to me why Nicolas Maduro is a bad person who definitely has been through elections, regardless as to what you think about them. We've had American presidents say they're among the most fair in the world. That was one of the things that Carter talked about in his book before he died. Okay. But then you have nothing to say about someone like Mohammed bin Salman, who is literally a crown prince. Like, where's the democracy in that? General Sisi in Egypt, he's somehow better. Like, when is he going to stand for an election? He came to power in a coup temporarily. He was going to be the interim president,
6 years.
much like Syria. Yeah, what I'm saying? Interim for life, man. Like Zelensky.
Tom Aspinall.
Right.
UFC reference for the people.
Right. You got little Juan Guaido type situations all around the world, and they're totally okay. They're 100% fine. Meanwhile,
speaking Arabic with a British accent, King Abdullah, Hashemite kingdom.
Oh my, yeah, King Abdullah, yeah. But then you get guys like Imran Khan, who win elections in Pakistan and then get sent to jail, right? Like, where's the cry out for democracy for that? Lula, the first time, won his presidency and was sent to jail, and then that's how we ended up with Bolsonaro in the first place. It's so the whole cries of democracy, that's always a red herring. You can't take that seriously in any kind of a real way, and again, it's not for the United States to impose governments on the world. I mean, think about all of the crying that came out of the Democrats, in 2016. Oh, Russian interference. That's why Hillary lost. But the Americans are openly interfering with elections all over the world and deposing people that are winning elections. They're doing that.
Hungary, Georgia, Moldova. We talked about this earlier this week.
Just, the very last episode.
Yeah, and what about Nepal? You got these Luffy, all
She's
these
a new interim president. We'll see how long she's interim.
Right. It's going to be a long interim. That's what I feel like.
Long interim. Long interim. Yeah. So, you continue to run into those things. I find it interesting, though, that Putin, at the end of that segment, he's like, you might find it surprising, but we're okay with the American proposal for Gaza. And those are the things why, like, the global South still has a lot of trepidation as it relates to Russia, because everybody knows this is a terrible deal. And he could easily be one of the main people saying that. That's a great, I've looked over this so-called deal in Gaza. The Palestinians get nothing. Israel gets everything. He could easily use that time to make those kind of statements, and that's not what he's doing. He's, I've known Trump for a long time.
No, don't get to that quite yet. Don't get to that quite yet. Yeah, that's what I was saying. Don't get to it quite yet. I'm going to go ahead and play it now. That way you can respond and we can have a discussion.
Right.
Yeah, he did have something else that he said that was going to be interesting.
And the President Trump, we've known each
and we'll get into that. So this is Vladimir Putin on President Trump, and we'll just go ahead and play it. Then I'll let you react immediately.
All right.
Yeah. President
great
Trump.
Result, and the President Trump, we've known each other for a long time.
And he likes to be flamboyant a little bit.
He likes to speak, and everyone sees
and
it.
everyone in the world can see it now. But he's the person. He's a
the kind of
good
person
listener.
who
He
can
knows how to
truly
listen. He knows
who can hear
how
what
to
you're saying.
react
He
to
responds to what
you
you're saying.
say to him. So
He's
it's
quite a
very
comfortable person to
comfortable to
speak to.
converse with
Easy
him.
to talk. He's easy to listen. I think sometimes people have just been, a lot of times people just, it can wear on them the amount that pressure that the United States puts on you. Again, you already kind of getting into your thought process. You can continue that and kind of give me your thoughts on this.
I mean, that's exactly it. Like he's you start to feel like maybe Putin has been there too long, right? Because, you can hear the Medvedevs in the ear, like the old man is losing it. He wants that respect from the West so much. He thought he could make a deal with Angela Merkel back when she was the prime minister of Germany. They admitted they made a fool out of him. They never intended to honor the Minsk Accords, which is what he signed with Angela Merkel. He went to Putin. He talked about that in the speech about, Putin went to Clinton, when he, famously asked, could Russia join NATO? And Clinton's like, I don't know. I need to go back and talk. You the president of the United States, man. If you wanted him in, you could have got him in. And, at least the European world would have been much safer. But the fact that he was even back then okay with maybe joining NATO, these are real question marks you have to have about Putin. I get it. It's his job to protect Russia, and that would have been something that would have been maybe the easiest thing he could have done to ensure the protection of Russia. Sign up with your number one enemy. I'm not your enemy anymore. Look, we're together, but you have to have real trepidation, when you're, places like the Sahel or, places like Gaza, anywhere in the Middle East, when you're watching, Putin is willing to give people up, to get just a little bit closer to the West. I mean, if American foreign policy wasn't so greedy, this would be achievable. This was literally something we talked about when we had Dr. CBS on. If sacrifice Ukraine, take, which they're doing anyway, you know what I'm saying? But they're not getting anything for it. The way they're using Ukraine is still going to lose. They're not going to achieve their goals. And the Russians will be, whoever comes next will have forever enmity against the Europeans and the Americans for what they've done. Meanwhile, if you were to sacrifice the Ukrainians, which, again, they're losing, to ally with the Russians, that would have disrupted the entire coming to Jesus that's happened between the Russians and the Chinese, and that's just not happened. The Americans have to have it all, and they'll use whatever to get that. That's why when we talk about empire, it's not just it's not being mean, it's not being cruel. This is an empire that is based and looks very positively towards, the British Empire and the Roman Empire that came before it. They see themselves as the ideological successors, and they will not brook any rivals. And in NATO, something like Russia, it still would have been a rival. And I don't mean that like in a way where like they'd be a rival, like a military rival. They would have been a technology rival. Now everybody's not going to buy F-35s. Maybe they buy Su-57s. Now everybody's not going to buy M1 Abrams. Maybe they buy T-72s or T-90 tanks. Now everybody's not necessarily going to buy, what are they instead of buying HIMARS, they might buy the Tornado systems from Russia, right? Russia makes almost all of the military equipment that pretty much everything the Americans make, the Russians make. And if we're in NATO, so who wins the bid, right? Is it going to are the NATO nations now going to use the Russian companies, or are they going to use the American companies? America doesn't want rivals like that, period, even if you're on their side. And that's been proven by look at how they've cannibalized the French military-industrial complex. Look at how they've cannibalized the British military-industrial complex. I mean, just a couple of years ago, they cut the French out of the deal. The French were supposed to build all these submarines for the Australians. It was a signed deal. And the Americans and the British came in and they're like, man, throw that shit away. We're going to give you nuclear submarines, which, by the way, the Americans have not been able to meet those obligations yet, by the way. So they threw away, and again, these destroy industries. That's what you do to your friends. So you can imagine what the American military industrial complex is willing to do to an enemy. Pete Hegseth said it all. We're here to kill people and break shit.
Yeah, it reminds me a lot, too, of what happened in Syria. Russia was there, was supposed to be helping out the Syrians. I'm not saying they could have helped in whatever the situation was, but it does seem like, they took in a side and they kept it moving. Osama bin Laden talked about this and their support in places like Afghanistan or lack of or aggression there, or places like Cuba. And I think Russia's got to kind of figure out how much they want to invest in proxies, places like Iran. Same thing with China. China's dealing with this as well. And they haven't had sort of the United States history of like wielding these proxies, like weapons. I mean, the United States does a really good job of doing that. And I think when you look at sort of the geopolitical impact and the geopolitical statecraft that the United States has, especially outside of their own region, is just unrivaled. I mean, we can talk about how good the Russian military is, and they're very good. But when it comes to this subterfuge thing, the United States is really good, and they're waiting for you to make a mistake. And they know that no one wants to deal with the full brunt of the United States military and the full brunt of
There's a difference between a global power and a hyperpower. And when you're looking at the total utilization of the assets of the statecraft, in addition to military projection power, the United States, though they're fading, is still a hyper power. The Russians are a global power. The Chinese are ascendant. They're close to being a hyper power, but they're not yet. And this is why they have to be so careful with even how they're moving through the world. A lot of people are, why don't the Chinese just break the blockade? So first off, like, how is China meant to do this, right? Like, China's hella far from there. Like, are they just going to sneak their navy into the Mediterranean? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, people don't, it's the same liberals that and leftists that talk about China should do more are like the same side of the center right and center liberals that are like, oh, we need to have a fucking no fly zone in Ukraine. Like, these things can't be done, not easily, not without explicit war. You know what I'm saying? And war with the United States, make no mistake. And that's not something that any country should foolishly engage in. You know what I'm saying? Like, war with the Americans at their own cost. There's nothing more dangerous than a wounded tiger. You know, 'cause that tiger wants to live.
They're the only country that's ever dropped a nuclear bomb in a war.
Twice.
You know, and they did it twice. At least, yeah.
In a theater of combat.
In a theater of war.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's give a shout out to our podcast listeners. We're available everywhere you find podcasts, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, all that good stuff. InnerCityLeft.com, Fables, Foibles, and Other American Sins. You can pick that up right now. Amin TMK, Lil Tanky on whatever music application that you utilize. Look us up, give us a stream, give us a purchase. Patreon.com/InnerCityLeft. Shout out to our patrons. I really appreciate all the work that you guys have been doing. And, you know, we're growing, we're moving, we are gaining, you know, getting bigger guests, we're getting more guests. And I can only imagine that that's going to continue. And without our patrons, we would not be able to do that. We're nearing in on 800 subscribers on our YouTube. Please send it out to your fam. If you're watching this and you're not subscribed, give us a subscribe. You know what it is. We're not going to get in them algorithms unless we have the support. Like, comment, share. You know what it is. Tanky, what do we miss? Thoughts, feelings before we get out of here?
Man, that speech, it was sad, man. That you know, I've spent the night at Tony Blair's house, and we were in our pajamas, and we had coffee. Like, what the? Man, Putin's losing it, man. He wants to be part of the club so bad. It's sad. You hate to see it.
System riding to the core. Yeah. Reppin' inner city left.